The title of the talk tonight is Only Love is Real. And what I wanted to do was to try yet again from a different direction to really make a frame for why we're even worried about or concerned with what are called destructive emotions or unwholesome emotions. And it's like, you know, as I started to work with it, I couldn't quite grasp what, if we don't just take it like, well, you have to be nice, according to what somebody says is nice, why would we work with these energies that are just normal energies of being a human being? How does it make sense? And in what ways do we allow these energies? And how is it important to allow these energies? And in what ways are they really, in fact, unwholesome and obscurations and, in some senses, destructive, although I don't think destructive is really quite the right word. So I wanted to, tonight, actually, I had a whole different talk, and then this is the talk that wanted to come, so here we are. It kept rewriting itself or reworking itself. It started out a long time ago, or a couple months ago, I asked for folks to submit questions, which, by the way, you're still welcome to do. Just shoot me an email if there are questions that don't get answered tonight, or there's something that you want me to address at some point in the series of talks. And someone asked a question, how do we coax the light out of the darkness? And as I contemplated that question, actually I was contemplating it the other morning as I was going through the Washington Post, and it just, there's so much darkness, there's so much stuff that really elicits all these kind of unpleasant sensations. And this question of how do we coax the light out of the darkness. So I started with just trying to address that, came up with Only Love is Real as I worked with it. But basically, how are we to be with all of this, what seems like darkness, all of this heavy stuff, and how do we be with ourselves when we feel out of balance? It's sort of going to be the theme. Some of you have signed up for the Finding Balance course that's going to start a week from tomorrow, and where we're going to be working and inquiring together into these energies that arise and how we work with them. And we start, as always, in any of these inquiries with the guidance of the Noble Eightfold Path with wise intention. And, what are our aspirations? Kind of check in with that. What are your aspirations when you're dealing with, say, difficult emotions? And wise discernment, wisdom, And when I get to wise discernment, some of you may remember a few weeks ago I said I had been listening to a Carole King song, which is, the title is Only Love is Real. She says, only love is real, everything else is illusion. And I went, wow, that's the Buddha talking. Because it's exactly the message of the Buddha. That only awareness, only this spacious, untrammeled, unobscured awareness that is filled with light and compassion, that's the only reality there is. Everything else is a mistaken perception. Everything else is a mistaken perception. That is such an awesome thing, such an awesome teaching. The Dalai Lama says all our difficulties result from mistaken perception. It's both really exciting and really daunting to think. All of our difficulties result from mistaken perception. Only love is real. All of our difficulties result from an obscuration of that. So it isn't so much, I'll propose, coaxing the light out of the darkness as remembering that there is this spaciousness, there is this light, and anything that seems to obscure that is a mistake. So we don't have to actually coax anything out of anything so much as it's sort of, the example that's been given is to, clean the mirror, to kind of wash off the obscurations of the mirror so that we can see clearly. It's a wonderful image because if you think about looking into a mirror and what you get back, but that's another talk, that really what you get back is the image of only love is real here. But that's another talk too. So all of our difficulties result from mistaken perception. So these difficulties that we have with difficult emotions result from mistaken perception. So that to kind of approach the whole experience of difficult emotions from this sort of very spacious, large, spacious place is really an important dimension of our inquiry together, because otherwise we are kind of constrained. It does kind of end up sounding like, you shouldn't get mad. Or don't be afraid, or something like that, or kind of get rid of it. And it ends up being sort of like one of those refrigerator magnets or something that you put on the refrigerator that's supposed to help. And for many of us, as we struggle with some of these difficult experiences, we see the solution as trying to change something out there. We think that, if fill in the blanks, if that weren't the case, then I wouldn't be feeling this unpleasant experience. Or better yet, then I wouldn't be suffering if this thing out there weren't happening. And we've talked before about the fact that in the Buddha's life, things were not simple. They actually weren't any simpler than they were now in our lives. He just didn't have, CNN and, Fox News reporting them all the time. But he really had quite a lot of difficulty and quite a lot of political difficulties in his life. So things were not so simple. So and at the same time, he was like, this isn't a problem. This isn't a problem. And so that those sufferings that would come up internally really were not arising, even though some of the energies may well have been. So for many of us, things that fit our ideas or wishes equal light, and things that don't equal darkness, and that if we want to have light, then we, think about even something as relatively simple as the political arena now, that light equals whatever party we think should prevail at this point, or whatever person we think should prevail, or whatever ideas we think should prevail. And the Buddha's teaching is, not necessarily. Like, really? All of our difficulties result from mistaken perception. So Siddhartha, on his, before he was enlightened, he really got that. He got that, no matter what we do, there are difficulties. There is sickness. Our bodies really conk out on us. There's aging, there's dying, there's bickering, there's relational problems. Things that we want to happen relationally don't. Things that we don't want to happen do. And so that really was what set him out on his quest. That deep realization that, very much the same place that we are now, and really very much the same reason why you are here tonight, why all of us are here tonight. That we all have that same kind of glimmer, don't we? That there's got to be a way around this. There's got to be a way through this. There's got to be a way of navigating this. Exactly the same kind of question that set Siddhartha out on his path. You know, when he too, I mean, you all have nice homes, you know, you have little fireplaces, you have cats and dogs, and you have cups of tea. You could be there tonight. And he too, he could have stayed in his home with the palace and the king and with his father, who said, he asked his father permission to leave and go become an ascetic, and his father said, absolutely not, you do not have my permission. And he left and actually ended up not connecting with his father for, I forget, 6-8 years, something like that. You know, that his quest for how to end suffering was so strong. And yours is too. Here you are. Here you are. Same motivation. Same motivation. So it gives, you know, it's the same question. How do we coax the light out of the darkness? Which actually, as we frame that question that way, is not quite exactly the question that we want to address, that we want to ask. And like us, even after he left home, he had practiced really, really hard for 6 years. And he was still confused. He said, you know, I've learned a great deal, but I'm still suffering. There's still not freedom from suffering. And what he had done was tried to deny the senses, tried to kind of suppress everything, tried to, you know, he was down to eating, it said, 1 grain of rice a day. And he finally realized that to try to push everything away and sit on himself was really not the way to go. At the same time, so what he realized was that indulging himself, you know, just saying, you know, maybe just more cups of tea will work, or suppressing that, you know, maybe just never having a cup of tea, that he tried sort of both extremes. And he said it's not really about either extreme, either denial or indulgence, but somehow coming into relationship with the energies of this human life. And then the question is, how do I do this? So the mistaken perception, one of them anyway, is that we think things, the contents of our minds, the energies that arise in our bodies, we think ourselves, we think we are real. We think we're tangible in some way, and that we have to somehow do something about it. We think that sound is real. And so I wanted to inquire into that a little bit tonight. It just sounds sort of strange, isn't it, to say that we think things are real, but they're really not. What on earth does that mean? You know, what on earth does that mean? This is a quote from Mahayana teacher. The first truth of Buddhism's 3 characteristics is that nothing is lost in the universe. Matter turns into energy. Energy turns into matter. A dead leaf turns into soil. A seed sprouts and becomes a new plant. Old solar systems disintegrate and turn into cosmic rays. We are born of our parents. Our children are born of us. Everything is moving constantly. Everything is moving constantly. So what is important is not what we are looking at, but how we are looking. It's not important what is arising in our experience. What is important is how we are looking at what is arising, what we are taking it, if you will, to be. It's a really subtle but crucial distinction. Because most of the time, we think, what we're responding to is the contents of our experience. We're responding to what is arising rather than the how we are relating to what is arising. And that's where we get into that kind of quirky argument about, is anger okay or not? Anger arises, doesn't it? Dislike arises. And then we start fighting with ourselves about whether or not this is okay or whether or not it should be there. It isn't about what is arising, it is about how we're relating to it. So the error for all of us is that we come to identify with things, both in ourselves and others. Everything is on its way to becoming something else. So nothing is actually real in the way that we have come to think it is. Bear with me here. And a little side note that I want to impose here is things actually are real. They're just not real in the way that we think they are. A leaf, a seed, a solar system, a person, all is real in its own way, but ultimately everything is on its way to becoming something else. Here's a quote from Jack Engler. This particular configuration that is me has a momentary reality of its own in the ongoing flux of change and transformation. And that reality is real in a relative sense, Mahayana Buddhists would say. I recall once hearing His Holiness the Dalai Lama interrupt a conference participant who had started to preface his question with what he imagined was a typical Buddhist disclaimer. Of course, I know the self doesn't exist, the man said. His Holiness jumped in. Wait, your self is very real. If you don't respect its reality, you will cause a lot of suffering to yourself. On the other hand, the self is not in the sense that it is not something which inherently exists. Self and no self form an emptiness, not only well, never mind, I'm not going to read that one. That'll just be too confusing. So it's, things are real in a kind of practical, functional, ordinary way. But ultimately, everything is on its way to becoming something else. So really the challenge just kind of flows into the question that was asked about energy. Really the challenge is learning how to surf. How do we ride the energies even when they're very strong, even when they throw us under the waves? How do we learn to ride the energies rather than how do we try to stop the waves or command the ocean to be different? So I want to just reflect a little bit on impermanence, the sense that everything is on its way to becoming something else. I want to just take a little break here for a moment and invite you again into a reflection. I want you to take my word for it. Would you, either by yourself or with a partner, or if you want to do a little scavenger hunt and go out into the building and see if you can find something, would you contemplate, is that true? Is there anything that is not on its way to becoming something else? I just invite you to contemplate that for a minute. Is there anything that you can come up with? You can do it. Again, you can talk with one another, you can go wander around, whatever. We have a lot of private reflection here. Might be moving quickly, might be moving slowly. This is a trick the Buddha question. What do you think? Anybody come up with anything? What? Love. Tricky. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
big awareness kind of, it changes, everything's like a cloud that passes past it. But I don't know if that
This
changes
kind of
the bigger.
the spacious awareness of love. Acceptance, love, awareness. Anything else? Buddha, yeah. Same thing, huh? This. And how would you define Buddha nature? What? Yeah, yeah. So in some traditions they use Buddha nature, in the sense of, right? Yeah. Yes? I didn't hear?
What do we consider it matter? Are we talking like atoms or are we talking about idea
Anything.
matter?
Matter?
Yeah, so how an idea or a thought have enough matter? It doesn't
I'm not sure I understand the question. How would,
so like say for example you have an idea,
uh-huh.
but it doesn't take up any like dirt or matter.
Right. Well, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question, so I may not be responding properly. But if you think about a thought, I mean, a thought is neurons, energy moving along neurons. That's been conditioned by whatever experiences and organizational strategies that we've had before. Huh? It's interesting, isn't it, how much we take our thoughts to be real? Yeah. Anybody come up with anything else? It's really, it's just sort of like, in a way, here I give the title of the talk, but I really would invite you to contemplate that as you go along. Julie, yeah? Yeah. Is always, right, it just always, yeah. Well, that it's always moving or changing into something else. So there's energy that comes into this form, it comes into that form, it changes, it breaks apart, it comes back together as something else. Yeah, I don't know enough about the physics, but I think the physicists would say it's the same no matter what level we're talking about. But it might, and again, it might be worthy of an inquiry. To really not just take it as, truth, but, yeah, Joan.
Truth. I think truth coming from the heart, not from the brain. Doesn't move. That's what it is.
What would truth be?
Comes into the heart of the brain.
What would you mean in terms of your own experience?
In my own experience, no one ever controls it. When truth comes from the heart, it's solid.
Well, it might be an interesting inquiry to look and see if that's really true. If it's really solid, if it doesn't change over time. It just might be an interesting inquiry.
The brain is going to change somewhat.
Yeah, I can think of some things that I was pretty confident about that actually have morphed. But then at what level is truth?
What do you see truth as?
What do you see truth as? Okay. Yeah, Michael? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing tonight. The Buddha?
Buddha talks about all birth and death, all meetings and departures, all gain and loss. The only thing constant is the circular nature.
Yeah.
So perhaps that circular nature.
The movement, the movement itself. The movement itself. Yeah. 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 So in some odd way, the movement is what doesn't change. Yeah. Just the flow. The flow. Yeah. One of the other characteristics that the Buddha talks about is that everything depends on everything else. So here we have impermanence and everything depending on everything else. We are the same as plants, as trees, as other people, as the rain that falls. We consist of that which is around us. We are the same as everything. If we destroy something around us, we destroy ourselves. If we cheat another, we cheat ourselves. So the conditioned nature of all phenomena, that nothing exists independent of everything else. There was a famous essay that was written by Milton Friedman about a pencil. I went and got a pencil out of my purse. And he said, no one knows how to make a pencil. Interesting. No one knows how to make a pencil. And this is just a little bit of the essay. He says, there's not a single person in the world who actually knows how to make a pencil. In order to make a pencil, you have to get wood for the barrel. In order to get wood, you have to have logging. You have to have somebody who can manufacture saws. No single person knows how to do all that. What's called lead isn't lead, it's graphite. It comes from some mines in South America. In order to make pencils, you have to be able to get the lead, and you have to know how to do that. And you have to know how to transport it to the place where they're going to put it into the pencil. The rubber at the tip isn't really rubber, but it used to be. It comes from Malaysia, although the rubber tree is not native to Malaysia. Oops. It was imported into Malaysia by some English botanists. So in order to make a pencil, you would have to be able to do at least all of these things. You'd actually have to be able to do quite a few more. Not to mention the fact that you'd have to be able to build a road that would get all these things, and a boat and a plane, and you'd have to be able to feed all these people and grow all the food, and you'd have to be able to do all of these things. There are probably thousands of people who have cooperated together to make that pencil I just dropped. Somehow or other, the people in South America who dug out the graphite cooperated with the people in Malaysia who tapped the rubber trees, cooperated with maybe other people in Oregon who cut down the trees and then, put it all together. Everything depends on everything else. This doesn't like my ear. These thousands of people don't know one another. They speak different languages. They come from different religions. They might hate one another if they met, yet they have cooperated together. In everything, you could take anything. Again, do a little homework assignment. Take your sweater or your shirt or the buttons on your shirt or the teacup that you have, and just contemplate how many people are present in the room. How many people are present here with all of these things? That everything depends on everything else, and that if one of those things was missing, it wouldn't have come together the way it did. So the Buddha's great insight is that there's just this energy moving fluidly, and it's all dependent on everything else. So whatever form anything takes at any given moment is completely dependent. So that the forms that are arising even in our own experience are fluid, impermanent, and dependent on all sorts of causes and conditions, external, internal. It's just the arisings of phenomena. This is how a Tibetan master describes it. He says, the fundamental nature of mind, this is sort of what you were getting at. The fundamental nature of mind is sheer lucidity, free and unfettered by concepts such as subject and object. A profound luminosity, free from partiality and fixation. A free-flowing, loving and compassionate expression of indefinable, limitless emptiness unobscured by thinking. Stuff just happening. Thought is bondage. The immeasurable openness of empty awareness is freedom. Compassion for those bound within their own illusory constructs, mind-forged manacles, and self-imposed limitations, spontaneously, unobstructedly, and inexhaustibly springs forth when we see that. Or perhaps more accessible. Let me try you another one here. Some of you have heard me read this quote from Thomas Merton. He had an awakening experience. One day he was running errands in Louisville. He was on a street corner waiting at the red light in Louisville. And he had an experience that is really exactly what the Tibetan master was just describing. In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world, the world of renunciation and supposed holiness. This sense of liberation from an illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy to me that I almost laughed out loud. I have the immense joy of being man, a member of a race in which God himself became incarnate. As if the sorrows and stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me, now I realize what we all actually are. And if only everybody could realize this, but it cannot be explained. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. And then Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk who died in the 90s, I think. His biography says that at the time of this experience, one of the things that going on in him was the maturing realization born of his contemplation that it is not possible to leave the world in any real sense. This is that place where, things are and they're not. So at the same time, it's not possible to leave the world in any real sense. He says, Merton writes, there is simply no place else to go. The experience challenged the concept of a separate, holy existence lived in a monastery. He experienced the glorious destiny that comes simply from being a human person and from being united with, not separated from, the rest of human experience and the rest of the human race. The experience in Louisville happened in the middle of an ordinary day when Merton was running errands. And then here's another quote from Merton himself. And I want you to imagine that he's speaking of you, which he is, actually. Then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts, where neither sin, nor desire, nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. So the great insight of all of the great spiritual traditions, Thomas Merton was a Catholic mystic, the surface appearance of things, while functional and useful in its own ways, you will each go and find your very own car. It's useful. While it's useful in its own way is not the end of the story. The fundamental nature of mind is our fundamental innate awareness. This pure awareness is the ground of all experience, of all thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. As such, it is naturally all-inclusive and wide open. Our dualistic thinking process tends to limit our attention to a very narrow sense of self as subject that seems to stand completely apart from others as object. Yet our fundamental pure awareness, even as it gives rise to such dualistic thoughts, is a vast expanse of knowing that transcends all such limitations, unfettered by concepts. And as obscure and challenging as this may sound, we all know something of this. You all know something of this, or you would not be here. That's that place that Joan is describing, that longing in your heart. You know, that kind of homing signal. And it takes place at various levels of our awareness. I'm going to talk next week. Actually, I'm going to talk 3 weeks in a row. I'm going to talk next week about the levels and how does this all apply to sort of the very mundane level, and how does it apply to some of the more, the deeper levels of awareness. So when our attention, this is a quote from John McCransky, who is a non-dual teacher. He says, when our attention is limited to self-concerned thoughts and reactions, those energies take shape in diluted, self-centered emotions like fear, possessiveness, and hatred, leading to harmful actions that throw us repeatedly into suffering. Through that profound recognition, thoughts that had previously formed into chains of self-centered thinking and emotion are spontaneously released within their own ground of empty knowingness, like ocean waves self-releasing into their own watery bed. Then the energies that had fueled diluted emotions are freed to manifest instead as boundless energies of love. So the point that he's making there is that if we can allow the energies of emotions to move, which some of you experienced as you were sitting in the guided meditation, if we can cultivate the capacity to allow them to move in our bodies, in our minds, they'll move. They will teach us what we need to know. They'll teach us how we need to act in this world of form. But they aren't like real in some fundamental sense. They'll just keep moving. They'll change into the energy of something else. So the challenge of our practice is at ever more subtle and deep levels to really cultivate the capacity with emotion to work where we are, start where we are, and to kind of keep manifesting love in its various forms at each of these levels. At each of these levels. And one of the ways of manifesting love we practiced in our guided meditation tonight is just really manifesting some care for the difficult emotion itself. Not as a solid thing, but as an energy that's present that wants our care. So there's no coaxing required. There's just practice. There is light. There is light. There just is. You can't unlight it. The invitation is to cultivate the capacity to deeply rest in it, no matter what. So the journey is one of awareness. Not fixing the content, but cultivating the capacity for deeper and deeper, more and more lucid, more and more clear awareness. Only love is real. So we'll stop there. We'll continue next week. Blessings.